Around the world, the royal family is the ultimate symbol of Great Britain. Whereas once monarchs left the country to wage wars, now they go to build allies and represent the country.
Often you do see these very important people, heads of state, the presidents, the prime ministers, starstruck by meeting the royals.
It's often on royal tours that we see their true power.
I think it's fairly obvious to everybody across the world what the key issues are.
They still have a huge amount of influence. I don't think people in the UK really realise how big the royal family is around the world.
But it's on these tours that we also gain an insight into who they really are.
When you're overseas with them, you get a little bit more of an idea of what makes them tick.
You are getting an insight into their private lives. They're just like the rest of us. They grieve, they love, they get angry, they get sad.
We've dug deep into the royal archives to find out more about the personalities that make the royal family.
It's fascinating to watch the royals at such close quarters, those moments when the mask slips.
I haven't yet worked out a method of splitting my wife in half.
From the moments of controversy.
He said to one student, "You stay here any longer and you'll end up with slitty eyes."
That was a huge furore, and has never been forgotten.
My eyeballs have been hanging out.
And personal heartbreak.
There were arguments behind closed doors. She was very often in tears before she went out onto a public engagement.
To the characters changing the royal family forever.
Princess Diana really revolutionised what people expect of a royal.
I'm not a political figure. I am a humanitarian figure.
That was Diana. She was courageous. She produced her celebrity.
With experience of hundreds of royal tours, we hear the inside story from those who have travelled with the royals as they reveal...
Colin, we need to change sides.
No, we don't.
...the secrets of the royal tours.
Extraordinary to look back on, isn't it?
September 2019. On a royal tour of Africa, Prince Harry walks through a minefield in Angola. It's 22 years after his mother, Princess Diana, took her iconic steps in the same country, highlighting the issue of landmines.
To walk in her footsteps is clearly quite emotional for me. But without question, if she hadn't have campaigned the way that she did 22 years ago, this could arguably still be a minefield.
For the world's press who were there, it was a new chapter in the story of royal tours.
I thought it was very interesting and hopefully quite cathartic for Harry as well. I mean, he's talked a lot about how he dealt with his mum's death, but I think for him to be able to continue his mother's work is very, very important to him.
There was another echo of royal tours of the past. Just like Prince William in 1983 and Prince George in 2014 on Pacific tours, we saw Archie make his first real appearance while overseas in South Africa.
It was a great moment when he got to meet Desmond Tutu, this icon. Archbishop meets Archie. The royal tour is a great status update on how the family is doing and how they're looking. I mean, it is the time we really get to see the children, so they are still big news wherever you go.
Harry and Meghan's tour to South Africa is the latest in more than 100 years of successful royal touring. But the monarch who made the royal tours her own was Queen Elizabeth. She got her first taste of overseas travel in 1947, when as a 20-year-old princess, she joined Sister Margaret and her parents, King George VI and Queen Consort Elizabeth, on a trip to South Africa.
Pretty well everyone in Cape Town must have been there to welcome the royal visitors, lining the streets, watching from windows and balconies, waving and cheering.
It was to have a profound effect on a young woman who had never previously left the United Kingdom. It was clear to her that her duties as Queen would go far beyond the people of Great Britain.
When Princess Elizabeth was 21, she gave a very moving speech on her birthday from Cape Town in South Africa, in which she pledged herself to her people.
I declare before you all that My whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong.
It was extraordinary for a girl of 21, so she was always very dutiful, very loyal, and very humble.
In 1952, the reign of Elizabeth II began while she was on foreign soil in Kenya.
Her tour cut short by the passing of her father.
As she rushed back to London, they realised there was something missing in the new Queen's luggage.
The Queen was famously caught out when she was in Kenya. She didn't have anything black to wear to change into, having learned that her father had died.
When her plane arrived at London Airport, with Winston Churchill waiting to greet her, the Queen had to wait on the plane while the appropriate dress was delivered. Eventually, Elizabeth II would emerge, all dressed in black.
The consequence of that was that from then on, all members of the royal family, wherever they go in the world, always take an outfit in black in case a member of the royal family dies while they're away.
No royal has travelled as much as the Queen.
My government will continue to support all constructive efforts to achieve a peaceful, just and lasting solution to this problem.
Over 7 decades of globetrotting, she has set the blueprint for royal tours as we know them today.
Elizabeth II has really defined what it means to go on a royal tour.
But why do the royals go on such tours? What exactly is the point of members of the Windsor family making these trips?
The British royal family is recognised globally. They are a global phenomenon. But at the same time, they're also our secret weapon.
You simply cannot put a price on the value of sending the Queen or indeed any other member of the royal family overseas to represent Great Britain.
Oh, the Queen is always very generous, very gracious. She's a wonderful lady.
They bring soft diplomacy. They can access areas other politicians can't. It's quite different, I think, sending a member of the royal family to, say, somewhere like the Middle East, which have their own royal families as well. They can talk on a level that perhaps even our Prime Minister or our Foreign Secretary can't reach.
Officially, it's up to the Foreign and Commonwealth Office to decide where they need to send the royals to use this soft diplomacy.
The royals don't do politics, of course, but they have been dispatched by the Foreign Office to press the flesh around the EU.
But when the royals are dispatched to represent Great Britain abroad, they need to be picture perfect, and there's a huge amount of planning needed.
The logistics of a royal tour are vast and myriad, and they take many, many months, sometimes up to a year to plan.
The planning is all about logistics, sleeping arrangements, transport arrangements, eating arrangements.
The planning is forensic. Are there loos anywhere nearby for not just the media pack, but also for the royals themselves? No stone is left unturned, nothing is left to chance. As much as they can humanly plan for, they absolutely do.
In the royal household, planning for royal tours is a huge operation. For female royals, the world's obsession with what they wear has meant they often need a large baggage allowance.
I remember getting in a plane in Darjeeling in India, and all of Kate's dresses had rows of seats to themselves.
For over 20 years, Paul Burrell toured the world with the royal family, with 10 years spent as a footman for the Queen.
My role on royal tours was to make sure the Queen was comfortable, that she had everything she wanted as if she was still at home. I had to make sure that the Queen had her feather-down pillow on every bed that she ever slept in, with her own linen pillowcase with ER embroidered in the corner. I had to make sure that in every bathroom that she would use, there would be a bottle of Malvern water brought with us, especially for Her Majesty. So everything is meticulously planned.
The royal luggage had a less than smooth landing, a rail loaded with the Queen's dresses nearly toppling onto the tarmac.
Spending days or weeks away, often needing a new outfit for each engagement, the scale of the luggage is immense.
On a royal tour, I would think the Queen must take in excess of 10 tons of luggage. All her day clothes go into steamer trunks, which are rather like wardrobes on wheels, and there are even large leather trunks just for hats.
There's another delicate issue to consider when planning a royal tour: the food.
I won't say they're fussy eaters, but they know what they like and they know what they don't like. They don't eat shellfish when they're out and about because it's better being safer than sorry.
Food has always been a diplomatic minefield for the Queen on tour because she doesn't particularly like highly spiced food.
For the Queen, it certainly isn't a case of when in Rome. In 2000, when she visited Italy, the Prime Minister's chef was under strict instructions.
Don't make the garlic, a lot of garlic, a lot of onion, a lot of pepper flakes, and it's possible not the long pasta, but a little pasta, because it's important for the Queen to eat in simple style.
Wherever she's been in the world, the Queen has always carried a secret treat to help get her through any engagement.
The Queen likes a barley sugar in her handbag. Just something to give her that glucose and sugar when she needs it most.
Throughout her long reign, the Queen's travels across the world would be vital for the monarchy, whilst her family's tours would reveal some of the most eventful moments in royal history. Queen Elizabeth II is by far the most travelled monarch in British history. Over 7 decades, she has been to 117 countries and come to symbolise the best of Britain overseas.
She's the only person in our country that does not need her passport. Prince Philip has one, and the Prince and Princess of Wales had passports. You are Her Majesty's Britannic subject. She can't be her own Britannic subject.
In 2015, the Queen made her final overseas trip to the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Malta. It was an emotional visit to a place with particular significance for her.
If there is a special place in her heart, it's got to be Malta.
I remember happy days here with Prince Philip when we were first married.
This is the Princess's first visit to the historic George Cross Island, and she was given the warmest possible reception by the people of Malta.
She spent quality time with Prince Philip when he was stationed there in the Royal Navy at the end of the 40s and the beginning of the 50s.
The Queen spent some of the happiest days of her marriage in Malta, almost living as an ordinary couple. Of course, that all changed when she became Queen in 1952.
The High and Mighty Princess Elizabeth Alexandra Mary is now Queen Elizabeth II.
God save the Queen!
Almost immediately, her life of royal tours began with her most epic. In November 1953, she went on a 6-month tour of the new Commonwealth formed in the wake of a crumbling empire.
Her father had ingrained that sense of duty from a very early stage in Elizabeth's life. And so for her, there was no question when her advisors suggested this tour of the Commonwealth that it was absolutely what she must do.
The tour was seen as vital in ensuring the unity of the Commonwealth, something that has been an enduring passion for her.
But it meant leaving 2 young children, Anne and, of course, Charles, behind. But the Queen understood from an early age the importance of connecting with the people.
The tour covered over 40,000 miles as she visited 13 countries in the West Indies, Asia, Africa, and Australasia. The reverence for the Queen was clear wherever she went.
Yes, they certainly knew their drill, these young Australians, and what a huge welcome they offered.
Prince Philip said you wouldn't believe the adulation. There were people, 20 deep lining the streets in this huge, huge country. The Queen actually got so exhausted from smiling that her face ached, and Prince Philip found that he was actually waving in his sleep. It was very intense.
In a rare TV appearance in 1985, the Queen reflected on this extraordinary tour.
We started in Bermuda and Jamaica, having flown out there, and then through the Panama Canal and across the Pacific. So it was leisurely, which is why it took so long. And then from Australia to Ceylon, then to Aden, and then an aeroplane to Africa, to Tobruk. Extraordinary to look back on, isn't it?
Since then, Queen Elizabeth has travelled another 1 million miles, the equivalent of 42 journeys around the globe. The country she has visited the most is Canada, with 27 trips. But her appeal has gone far beyond that of the Commonwealth.
The Queen's tours are almost sort of reverential. She's such an iconic figure now, not just in the UK, but around the world. And as she's grown older, that iconism, if you like, has grown.
One man who's followed her around the world is renowned royal photographer Arthur Edwards.
When I've been on Queen's visits, whether it's Canada or it's Ghana, the respect for her. I remember in Ghana, the noise, the tribes came in, it was just phenomenal.
Travelling with royalty, Arthur's seen some of the memorable unreported moments on tours.
The first trip I did on the royal flight was the Queen from Nairobi to Dhaka in Bangladesh. We had to board an hour before the Queen. And as we boarded the plane, there were the hostesses with the trays of champagne. And of course, by the time the Queen got on an hour later, there was a party going up the back of the plane. Well, we never travelled with them again for 20 years, let's say no more. I always remember the Duke of Edinburgh looking around the curtain, what was all the noise?
But he's also been there at some of the Queen's more awkward public encounters. One of the most infamous was in 1991, when she arrived at the White House to meet President George Bush.
George made a welcoming speech, and then the Queen went up. Well, of course, the lectern was set for George and not for the Queen, and all you could see was the top of the Queen's hat.
She stood behind the podium, and what you had was a talking hat.
Mr. President, thank you for your warm welcome to Washington.
It was a very funny moment, and she took it all in her stride.
Fortunately, the Queen showed her sense of humour a few days later when she addressed Congress.
It was a great feeling when she stood up, and that all the senators and the congressmen applauded her. And then she stood up and she said,
I do hope you can see me today from where you are.
And they all stood up again and clapped for another 2 minutes. It was such a great joke.
Throughout it all, wherever the Queen has gone, so has Prince Philip. He's in fact never missed one of the Queen's overseas tours.
Prince Philip is just the perfect consort because mainly he's the icebreaker. And a lot of people don't know is the Queen is quite a shy person, and Philip is very good at making sure she's relaxed, in a good mood. He can lead the conversation.
Down the years, however, some of these conversations have led to notorious gaffes.
A British student from Edinburgh University said the Duke of Edinburgh had told him he'd found Peking ghastly and boring and suggested he go home soon in case he got slitty eyes.
I was there, and he said to one student, stay here any longer and you'll end up with slitty eyes. Now, the British press, reporting press, went apoplectic. Chinese thought it was very funny, actually.
Of course, it's not just the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh who have been representing the royals overseas. By the 1970s, a young Prince Charles was doing his fair share of flying the flag.
We're particularly grateful to you to let us stay in the White House. And little did we expect that the first and the only house we would stay in on our first visit would be the White House.
But with the world very different from when his mother began touring, his approach has often been less buttoned up.
Prince Charles, serious man, but he was prepared to have a laugh, if you like.
In particular, the prince has never turned down an opportunity to dance.
Oh, yeah, he's a brilliant dancer. And then he puts his heart and soul into it. He just joins in, he can't stop himself.
He'll always throw himself into the dancing. If there's food to be eaten, he'll always try it. If there's a drink to be supped, he'll always give it a try. He always absolutely throws himself into everything. If there's a good-looking lady to be, kind of have his arm around, very happy to pose.
He's got natural rhythm and he gives it everything. He's just incredible.
Down the years, he's also sported some interesting headwear.
In the Caribbean, I've seen him put a Rasta wig on. I'm not sure he'd get away with that sort of cultural appropriation these days. In the rainforest, he wore a fantastic feathered headdress that someone presented to him in Central America, and he was sort of up for it, if you like. And he knew it would make a good picture, and if it helped tell the story of why he was there, then he was happy to do so.
For the royals, though, the press story hasn't always been up to them. When Prince Charles visited Australia in 1979, he was the most eligible bachelor on the planet. So when a young model gave him a kiss as he emerged from the sea, it caused a sensation.
It was a great image for Charles. It was a very manly picture of him. And you know, I think it did his PR and his image a huge amount of good.
In just over a year, his engagement to Lady Diana Spencer was announced. For the royals, everything was about to change.
She wanted to be an ambassador, roving around the world, showing, not telling, showing people what was happening.
Princess Diana would revolutionize the image of the royal tour forever. Royal tours give us a special insight into the lives and personalities of the British royal family. The Queen set the standard, travelling more than any other monarch in history. Charles was tasked with bringing the royal image up to date, but Princess Diana's arrival would change everything.
It really started that whole Diana mania, Di mania it was called by the press, in Australia on that first tour that she and Charles went on.
It was incredible, the reception. I'll never forget it. I remember at Sydney Opera House, they couldn't get any more people there. Brisbane, they closed Brisbane, you know, they couldn't get any more people into Brisbane. And, you know, the crowds were sort of 5, 6, 7, 8 deep.
Diana's enormous appeal was grounded in a fresh, personable approach.
She's the first person I remember seeing kneeling down to a child in the crowd. People just went weak at the knees when they saw her.
I haven't yet worked out a method of splitting my wife in half. She can do both sides.
The focus was very much on Diana, but at that time, Charles didn't seem to be minding. He might have done, but it was very much on her. And he was like an also-ran.
I've come to the conclusion that really it would have been far easier to have had 2 wives. To have covered both sides of the street. And I could have walked down the middle, directing the operation.
Millions of Australians turned out to meet the couple, and for the first time ever, a royal baby, a 9-month-old Prince William.
All we can say is that it has been the greatest possible joy and pleasure to have him with us during this visit.
I think Prince William was the first royal child to certainly go as far as Australia. He had what we called a crawlabout in the grounds of Government House in Auckland in this sort of beautiful silk romper suit. And, you know, they got the pictures.
Diana's first royal tour was a huge success, but she had done things her way, not necessarily the royal way.
The princess broke protocol every single day on a royal tour. She did kneel down to speak to children. She did wear no gloves. She was told to wear gloves. Diana, you must wear gloves. If you touch these people, you might catch something. Of course, Diana wanted to do it her way. She didn't wear gloves. She did kneel down to children. She found her level.
She was the first sort of royal celebrity, if you like, and it wasn't just confined to the UK.
Diana's royal celebrity appealed not just to the public, but also to the press. In 1985, Charles and Diana travelled to Washington with the world's media watching.
American trips were always huge for the royals because the crowds in America were big and they were always very starry.
And no crowd was starrier than the celebrities that gathered for a formal reception at Ronald Reagan's White House.
We flew into Washington and I was told when I got off the plane, you've got the pool tonight. So we got all the arrivals, creme de la America, you know, anyone who had money was there.
They were totally starstruck by Diana, because I suppose she was probably as big a star as they were.
Diana knew that on the guest list was the ballet star, Mikhail Baryshnikov. And she was longing to dance with Baryshnikov at the White House because she knew there would be dancing. Nancy Reagan, Reagan's wife, had a very different idea and wanted her to dance with some of the major Hollywood celebrities that she'd invited, including Clint Eastwood, who was going to be there.
I'll let you know after the evening. I don't step on the camera.
But in the end, it was John Travolta who was chosen to dance with her.
Of all the great pictures, of course, the greatest picture of all was her dancing with the legend.
When the tours go well, then the planning is brilliant and everything is ticked, all the boxes are necessarily ticked off, and they feel incredibly efficient. But sometimes they don't go well, and for any kind of reasons, and then they can seem chaotic, disorganized, and frankly, a complete mess.
By the time of their 1986 tour to Canada, the press attention had become overwhelming for Diana.
I don't think it was a happy period for Diana, because she was very quiet.
The heavy, almost relentless schedule of events was beginning to wear her down, particularly the constant touring of expo pavilions, 5 hours of it at a time.
She famously fainted after visiting the expo exhibition in Vancouver Island.
She was led away, much distressed, by her doctor, Surgeon Commander Ian Jenkins. The Prince followed behind. She recovered in the pavilion's washroom.
The response was frenzied, both from the authorities and
news desk. And I remember Harry came up and he was white. He said, "They want me to turn the plane around."
That's how big it was. I mean, she was a mega story, and I remember the editor screaming at Ken Gavin, a mate of mine, "Get back, honey, get back to Vancouver."
The press instantly got hold of the wrong end of the stick, that she must be pregnant. She wasn't pregnant. She simply didn't have the strength, and the heat of the day, it all became too much for her.
Charles's attempt to lighten the mood fell rather flat.
It's really entirely due to the extremely advantageous conditions that pertain in British Columbia, the weather, and the general fertile conditions which have ensured that she's about to have sextuplets, which is really why she fainted. It's not actually true, but there we are.
For Charles, the media circus around Diana was part of a larger problem. Wherever they went, it was Diana that people wanted to see.
Why are they shouting your name? You're just my wife. I'm the royal. I'm the man that was born to be king. You were not. So it caused very difficult problems for the royal couple. And that did translate to unhappy royal tours.
Tragically, for Charles and Diana, the issue of their marriage and their clear unhappiness became the central theme of the reporting about them from the late 1980s onwards. We were picking up all sorts of signs, particularly when we were on tour with them, that all was not well. Matters really came to a head, I guess, in early 1992, when they were scheduled to visit India.
By that time, 1992, the marriage was really on the rocks.
You could see the tensions in the marriage were overtaking the whole agenda, and they weren't helping each other.
Famously, as a bachelor, Charles had visited the Taj Mahal and had said at the time that one day he would like to come back here with his wife. So we knew all about that, and here we are many years later wondering if that was going to happen. And the Taj Mahal is indeed slated for a visit, but it's just Princess Diana.
A wiser prince than I would have opted for a visit to the Taj Mahal and the Red Fort at Agra, which I believe is where some, at least, of the greatest pundits of the press think I ought to be anyway.
The palace were really unable to control things. Both Charles and Diana were running their own briefing operations. They had their friends in the media. Stories were being dripped out about the state of the marriage. It was very difficult.
We see that iconic photograph of Diana sitting on the seat in the Taj Mahal in the background. Well, actually, and moments before, there was just hundreds of people all around her. And it was only that when the photographers and the reporters managed to persuade her to do it, and then fired in the question, how does it make you feel? And she said, it's a very healing experience. And someone said, what do you mean by that? And she said, oh, make of it what you will. And of course, the press made quite a lot of it.
This was quite a difficult tour for her in trying to perform and look as though everything was okay, when actually she knew it wasn't. But more importantly, of course, the following paparazzi and press knew also. It was really the beginning of the end of royal tours for both the prince and the princess.
By the time they went to Korea, just weeks before John Major announced the separation in the House of Commons, they were clearly at breaking point.
And the plane landed, the door opened, and Mr. and Mrs. Glum stood in the doorway. And it was not if, but when they would announce when they would separate.
Neither of them particularly wanted to go on it. The prince and princess were barely talking at this point.
There's a wonderful photograph of them looking out of the car opposite sides. I mean, they would rather have been anywhere on Earth than in the same car together.
It was widely perceived as being a disastrous tour. To this day, I can't really tell you why we were there.
He asked Dickie Arbiter, who was the press secretary at the time, when the next royal tour was going to be of the couple, and he said he wouldn't give us the time. Understandably, he wouldn't tell us who it was, and we said, well, if you don't tell us, we're going to write that this is the last one and the marriage is over. Well, pretty much we've got it right.
Charles and Diana separated in 1992. Despite that, she retained her privileges as a member of the royal family, including official travel abroad.
Her tours post-separation were sort of very stripped down royal tours, and there was an informality about them. She was going to parts of the world like remoter parts of Indonesia, where there were still these leper colonies. The idea of them still existing seemed extraordinary in the late 20th century. And I remember Diana going to this institution and shaking people's hands. I mean, this was at a time when people still felt that if you shook the hand of a leper, you might lose your finger.
Diana was heavily criticised in the media at that time, and yet despite that criticism, she stuck with it. I mean, even the Queen herself was unhappy with Diana being involved. I may say unhappy. She had told Diana, why don't you do something nice? It wasn't a question of doing something nice, it was a question of saying, what can I do as a member of the royal family to make things work and change?
Diana certainly did have the wow factor. One particular instance, I think of Diana in Angola, walking through a cleared minefield.
Colin, we need to change sides. We need
When Diana chose to walk through a live minefield, the press were there to capture the moment.
Go ahead, he's in with her. We need her up nearest to sign.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, we need the pool out of the way as well.
The minefield had been cleared, and it was a minefield, but I mean, the path had been cleared. There were mines either side, but it had been checked. But the funny thing about that was, of course, the photographers, we were all, G'd up to get the pictures. There she is in the visor, and she's just walked through the minefield, and they weren't happy, so they asked her to walk through again, and she did it a second time because they didn't get the best pictures.
This is very much early phase
we put in pioneering lanes to see what's going on. We're doing on it works.
Angola was in the depths of a brutal civil war, one that had killed more than 400,000 civilians.
That iconic picture was a red light moment. People sort of took notice that, yes, something has got to be done.
This nation has the highest number of amputees per population than anywhere in the world. The current statistic stands at 1 amputee per 334 inhabitants.
I think that she did an amazing job to raise the profile of the problem. Until then, nobody really knew about the issue in Angola or in Bosnia. And, you know, her sitting there with these terribly maimed children, these are hugely emotive photographs. And really, when you were up close seeing it, you know, you have a lump in your throat when you see the injuries that these terrible things have caused.
Landmines were banned almost worldwide shortly after Diana's visit, but the praise was not universal.
She was getting absolutely lambasted by the government, saying that she shouldn't get involved in political issues.
She insisted she had not been worried by the debate back home that had resulted from her comments.
I saw it merely as a distraction because I'm not a political figure. I am a humanitarian figure, and always have been and always will be.
She was courageous. She would push the boundaries to try to use her celebrity for the better.
Diana's tour of Angola was her last royal engagement. It would be left to her sons to shape the royal tours of the future.
Princess Diana really revolutionised what people expect of a royal. For two things off the top of my head, her work with landmines charities and her work with AIDS charities. That had not been seen before.
Harry has been particularly informed by his mother's legacy. His and Meghan's tour to South Africa has focused on environmental conservation, AIDS awareness, and the empowerment of women.
I think William and Harry and their wives want to forge their own paths, but they are influenced, obviously, by what's gone before, and I think they're particularly influenced by their mother, particularly Harry, who has followed in his mother's footsteps in the sense that he's taken up many of the issues that she was involved in.
Harry went back to Huambo, and to show what a positive effect the Halo Trust has had in clearing landmines. Now, that minefield where Diana was famously pictured with lots and lots of kind of vegetation, now it's a shopping street.
To walk in her footsteps is clearly quite emotional for me. But I think as much as she did then, there is still so much to do. But without question, if she hadn't have campaigned the way that she did 22 years ago, this could arguably still be a minefield.
It was hopefully quite cathartic for Harry as well. I mean, he's talked a lot about how he dealt with his mum's death. But I think for him to be able to continue his mother's work is very, very important to him.
Firing!
The new generation of royals have been left with a choice: the Queen's reserved formality or Diana's political and proactive role.
It's not a question of any one individual modernising the monarchy. It's just that it's the way that they do their individual engagements, the way they approach things.
Harry is much more relaxed. He has an informal streak. He doesn't like the clunking officialdom that often associates royalty. He likes going about things in his own rather unique way. He likes being called Harry. You know, he's not so worried about formal titles like Your Royal Highness.
When I've travelled with Harry, it's incredible. Harry is like special for young people. He just will not quit until he's made that child happy, some way happy. In Lesotho, which he started this amazing charity called Sentabale with the Prince of Lesotho. You know, he's been there many times, working to help the children there.
Although our situations couldn't have been more different, I felt an overwhelming connection to many of the children I met. We shared a similar feeling of loss, having a loved one, in my case a parent, snatched away so suddenly.
What he did there, which was the most amazing thing, he started a night school for them because They get no education. When you see someone like that, when you see something like that, you see in him, you obviously see Diana, because that's what she would do. The kids walk for up to 2 hours of a night to come there, and the teacher was teaching them simple maths, and they were riveted. Afterwards, I said, "It's important to you, Harry, this?" He said, "This is the most important thing I've ever done."
William, a future king, has chosen a more formal approach.
William is going to be the king, a future monarch, so he's slightly more cautious about what he does and how much he reveals of himself. In that regard, he's much more like his grandmother.
On their 2014 tour to Australia, William and his family played their role to perfection.
You have to remember that there was a growing feeling of republicanism in Australia at that time. You know, certainly the idea of the country perhaps going down a republic route was becoming more of a possibility. It was a narrative that had been gathering momentum. Well, Prince George turned all of that round the minute that we saw him coming down the steps of the plane. Prince George was hailed in the press, I think, around the world, the Republican slayer.
I spoke to somebody from the Republican group in Sydney who, he wouldn't say this on camera, but off camera he said, "We're stuffed."
That tour ended up being arguably the most successful tour to Australia and New Zealand for the royal family. It went so amazingly well. It brought them a huge amount of goodwill from the Australian and New Zealand people to them as a family, and by extension to the royal family. And that is what this is all about, currying favour, forging those connections for the decades to come.
On royal tours, particularly with Harry and William, if they're visiting a country that their parents have been to, quite a lot of thought is put into, if they're visiting a site where their parents have visited, are they going to do something similar? Are they going to do something different? In Agra, when William and Kate went to the Taj Mahal, there was a huge hoo-ha about whether William and Kate were going to recreate that iconic picture of Princess Diana in 1992 sitting on her own.
I was there for that Taj Mahal moment, and we weren't sure until it actually happened that they were going to do it. I mean, they're aware that it's an iconic photograph. They're aware that the Indian government wants an iconic photograph of them in front of the Taj Mahal. You know, they know that's what's required from their role, and however much it is history repeating itself, there are some things they just have to do.
Eventually, on the morning of their visit to the Taj, we were told, yes, William and Kate would sit on that bench. Yes, they would pose in exactly the same spot as William's mother. That must have been quite, maybe not a tricky decision for him, because obviously the right decision was to sit there, pose with Kate, aren't we happy, etc., etc. But it must have thrown up a lot of emotion.
I'm not sure if William really wanted to do it, but I think he realised that the public wanted to see it, the press certainly wanted to see it. It's no secret that the relationship between the media and the royal family is fractious at times, tenuous. It's not always a bed of roses, I think it's fair to say. On royal tours, you get, I think, more cooperation and collaboration probably than at any other time. And I think that's quite simply because they want the tour to be a success. They need that oxygen of publicity. They need the media to be behind it.
Next time, we delve deep behind the scenes to show you some of the most dramatic mishaps of the royal tour.
3 eggs were thrown by 2 girls wearing stewards' white coats. They were quickly seized, but security had failed.
Life aboard the royal yacht Britannia.
Prince William produced the 2-handed version of the wave, which happens to be the very Italian way of saying ciao.
And some of the royals' more embarrassing moments.
The nickname is a phallic clam. It's this clam that kind of the mollusk kind of comes out of, and it does look quite phallic. Suddenly, the guy behind the stall suddenly offers it up for them to eat.
and personal heartbreak.
There were arguments behind closed doors. She was very often in tears before she went out onto a public engagement.
To the characters changing the royal family forever.
Princess Diana really revolutionised what people expect of a royal.
I'm not a political figure. I am a humanitarian figure.
That was Diana. She was courageous. She used her celebrity.
With experience of hundreds of royal tours, we hear the inside story from those who have travelled with the royals as they reveal...
Colin, we need to change sides. We don't.
...the secrets of the royal tours.
Extraordinary to look back on, isn't it?
September 2019. On a royal tour of Africa, Prince Harry walks through a minefield in Angola. It's 22 years after his mother, Princess Diana, took her iconic steps in the same country, highlighting the issue of landmines.
To walk in her footsteps is clearly quite emotional for me. But without question, if she hadn't have campaigned the way that she did 22 years ago, this could arguably still be a minefield.